You've had the menu open for about 6 minutes now, and you know what you want. You've known for 4 of those minutes. You're just still reading it, top to bottom, one more time, in case there's something on there you missed. Everyone else at the table closed theirs a while ago. They're talking. You're nodding along, sort of, while your eyes drift back to page 2. And when the waiter comes, you'll order the thing you'd already decided on 6 minutes ago. Same thing. All of that for nothing. And it's not just menus, obviously. It's 9 tabs open for something that costs $30. It's an hour and a half on the 3-star reviews because those are the honest ones. It's 40 minutes picking a show, 4 trailers deep, and then it's too late to start anything, so you put on something you've already seen twice. And here's the one that really gives it away. You buy the thing. It shows up, it's good, you like it, and then you go and check whether it got cheaper somewhere else. Think about that for a second. There's no answer to that question that helps you. Same price, nothing happens. Cheaper, and you feel sick. You looked anyway. Or the tags. You're pretty sure you want it. You're keeping the tags on for a bit though, just in case. Meanwhile, there's someone in your life who looks at a menu for 9 seconds, says a thing, closes it, and is then apparently completely fine for the rest of the evening. And you've probably quietly decided that they just care less than you do. So you've got a word for yourself by now. Indecisive. Maybe a few words. Indecisive, overthinker, kind of anxious, bad at this. And underneath all of them is the same idea, which is that everyone else got issued some normal deciding ability and you didn't. I want to take that whole story off the table, because you're not bad at deciding. You're doing something genuinely harder than the people who decide fast. And once you can see what it is, the paralysis stops looking like a flaw and starts looking like arithmetic. Okay, so back in the 50s, there's an economist and psychologist called Herbert Simon, and he's looking at how economics describe decisions, which at the time was basically this. A rational person weighs up all the options and picks the optimal one. And Simon goes, no, nobody does that. Nobody can. You don't have the time, you don't have the information, you don't have the attention span, and neither does anybody else. So what do people actually do? They set a bar. Some rough idea of what would be acceptable. Then they look through the options until something clears the bar, they take it, and they stop. He gave it a name, satisficing. Satisfy plus suffice, smashed together, good enough. And this is the part I want you to really sit with because it's the whole video. Satisficing comes with a built-in off switch. Think about it. If your rule is something that clears my bar, then the second something clears your bar, the search is over. Automatically. You don't have to decide to stop looking. The rule stops you. That's what your 9-second friend is doing. They're not more decisive than you. They're not more relaxed about it either, or less invested. They just set a bar before they opened the menu, and the first thing that cleared it ended the search. Now, you're not doing that. You're looking for the best one. Not a good one, the best one. And that sounds like the same job done more carefully, and it really, really isn't. Because the difference is structural. Good enough is something you can check against the thing in front of you. Is this acceptable? Yes or no. You've got your answer straight away. The best doesn't work like that. The best isn't a property of the thing in front of you at all. It's a comparison against every other option, including the ones you haven't looked at yet. So you can confirm that something meets your bar. You can never, ever confirm that you've seen everything, which means your search has no exit condition in it. It's not that you're failing to stop. There is nothing in the task that could ever tell you to stop. Picture 2 searches running side by side. The first one has a finish line drawn across it, and the runner crosses it, and that's that. Done. The second one is the exact same track, except there's no line anywhere on it, just more track. And the runner is doing everything right, running well, running hard. There's just nowhere in the whole thing where they get to be finished. And this explains the strangest part of all of it, the part that makes people feel the most broken. The decision doesn't end when you make it. You'd expect it to, right? You choose, the search closes, you move on. But your standard is still open for business after you've paid. Is this the best one is still a live question the next morning. So of course you go and check the price. Of course, you reread the menu after you've ordered. The choosing happened, but the search never got its ending, so it just carries on running quietly in the background. Now, I want to do something slightly annoying and take away an explanation you've probably already got for this. You've heard that too much choice is the problem. There were too many options. There's that famous study with the jams where they put out 6 jars and lots of people bought one. Then they put out 24 and almost nobody did. The paradox of choice. It's everywhere. Here's the trouble with it. It didn't hold up. When researchers went back and pooled around 50 experiments testing this, thousands of people, the average effect came out at roughly 0. One of them reran the jam study directly and got nothing. The famous jam table. All those little jars lined up in a row with the tasting spoons, and then a big red X straight through the whole thing. And honestly, that's good news for you, even though it just took your explanation away. Because if the problem were the number of options, then the problem would be out there, in the world, in the size of the menu, and there's not a lot you can do about the size of a menu. But it isn't the menu, it's the rule you're bringing to the menu. 6 options or 600, if you're looking for the best one, there's no finish line either way. That part is yours. Which is annoying, but it also means it's actually reachable. Okay, second thing that's going on, and this one is about afterwards. All that searching isn't wasted. You genuinely learn the options. By the end, you know them well. You could tell someone the pros and cons of the 4 you didn't pick. And that turns out to be the exact raw material that regret runs on. Regret isn't really about the thing you got. Regret is a comparison. It's the thing you got sitting next to a version of events that went better. There's a term for those, upward counterfactuals, which is a horrible phrase for something very simple. It's if only. If only I'd gotten the other one. And you can't build a vivid if only about an option you never looked at. You need to know the alternative well enough to picture it going well. So the more thoroughly you searched, the better stocked your if-only shelf is afterwards. All that care you put in at the front becomes the ammunition later. Which is kind of unfair, honestly. Someone walking out of a store with 1 shopping bag, and trailing along behind them, floating, 4 faint, ghostly versions of the things they didn't buy, all of them looking suspiciously great. And there's a study here that I find genuinely startling. Researchers followed a group of students through their final year while they were job hunting, and they'd measured beforehand who tended to search for the best option and who tended to go with good enough. The hard searchers did better, objectively better. They landed jobs with something like 20% higher starting salaries. 20%. That's not nothing. That's a real difference in a person's life. And they were less happy with those jobs, less satisfied with what they'd gotten, and they felt worse the whole way through the search too. Now that's one study, one group of students, so hold it a little loosely. But sit with what it's pointing at. The searching works. You're probably not making worse choices than the fast people. You may well be making better ones. You're just paying for it in what it feels like to be you while you do it. Which means the bad feeling was never evidence that you were getting it wrong. And then there's the tags. You bought the thing, receipt kept, tags on, still in the bag, return window noted. You're not sure yet. You want to leave it open. There's some evidence that this is its own trap. Normally, when you commit to something, your mind quietly starts working on your behalf. It talks the thing up a bit, notices what's good about it. That's just what minds do once a door is properly shut. And it's a big part of why people end up happy with what they picked. But that only kicks in if the door is actually shut. Stay ready to swap and the whole process never starts. So the thing never gets its chance to settle into feeling right. Which is the sad little loop of it. The move that was supposed to protect you from choosing wrong is the same move stopping it from ever feeling right. Okay. So here's where I think this lands, and it's not where people usually take it. The advice at this point is normally, care less. Lower your standards. Stop being so fussy. Just pick something. It doesn't matter. And I don't think that's right. There's actually something in the research about this. When researchers pulled this whole maximizing tendency apart to see what it's made of, it came apart into a few different pieces. One is how much you search around. One is how hard you find it to actually make the call. And one is just having high standards. And the high standards piece wasn't the problem. It didn't track with depression or with life satisfaction or with being less happy. It looked pretty harmless, honestly. The thing that actually tracked with regret and with feeling worse was the difficulty closing the decision. So it was never your standards. Your standards are fine. Caring about getting good things is fine. It's the search with no ending and the choice that never shuts, doing the damage, which makes the useful move a small one, and it isn't caring less. It's deciding what would be good enough before you start looking. That's it. That's the entire trick your 9-second friend is running. Not lower standards, earlier ones. A bar set in advance so that when something clears it, your search gets to be over. And then letting that be the actual end. Not the end for now, the end. You can also just size the search to the thing. An hour and a half is a completely reasonable amount of research for a mattress you'll sleep on for the next 8 years. It's an absurd amount for a $30 item you'll have forgotten you own by spring. Same person, same standards, wildly different amounts of runway. So that thing you do with the menu, it isn't a defect in you, and it isn't anxiety about nothing. You handed yourself a search with no finish line in it, and then you spent years blaming yourself for not finishing. Give it a line, anywhere. A slightly arbitrary line beats no line at all, because the line is the thing that lets you stop, and stopping is the part you've never actually had. And you get to keep all of the caring. That was never the problem. If this put words to something you do about 4 times a day, that's what this channel is for. Understanding yourself a little better, one thing at a time. Nothing beats a solid mind.